Welcome, everybody, to the A Little Less Fear podcast. I'm your producer and host of the show, Dr. Lino Martinez. This is your motivational podcast of people's incredible journeys. Oh, yeah, let's do this. Welcome back, everybody, to the A Little Less Fear podcast. Today, I would love to welcome Phyllis E. Leavitt. She has just written a book called America in Therapy, a new approach to hope and healing for a nation in crisis, in which she talks about the urgency to bring our whole country to therapy in a way never written about before. With well over 30 years experience as a psychotherapist, she felt a deep calling to share all she has learned with the public and demonstrate how the principles of the best psychotherapy can be used to help heal our country of escalating hatred, divisiveness, and violence. She speaks to all of us who fear for our children and all our future generations who may feel hopeless or resigned or simply don't know what to do to help create a more loving and sustainable world. I would love to know. Thank you so much for being on A Little Less Fear podcast. This is amazing.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I love the way you said that, all of that. That was a really nice synopsis.
Oh, thank you. Well, hey, it's your energy, so it's
Oh.
really beautiful energy. Thank you for your energy.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
man, Phyllis. So, Phyllis, you got a new book here, America in Therapy, a new approach to hope and healing for a nation in crisis. What brought you to such a profound topic?
Yeah, I mean, like so many people, and like you shared about your own life, I didn't have a medical crisis, but I definitely had an emotional one. And I had some trauma in my childhood, some abuse in my childhood that I had buried. And it just put a shadow over my whole life that I could not understand. I could not understand why I had so much pain that was undefinable on an emotional level. And when I was young, and I'm an older generation, obviously, people didn't talk about that. People really didn't talk about feelings. It was really all about, getting an education, getting a job, getting married where you lived, kind of, making yourself in an outward appearance of success. And that's just kind of the milieu that I grew up in. And so I had no language for what was going on with me. And I think that's a really important thing, because I think when people speak and they explain things and you can relate to them, which is a lot of what good psychotherapy does, it's not all of it, but it's part of what it does. You start to make sense of yourself,
Yes,
in a
absolutely.
way that I really didn't before. And so, long story very short, I was attracted to many spiritual paths when I was young, and they were very helpful in a certain way, but they didn't heal what was going on with me, because I didn't know what was going on with me.
Mhm.
And eventually, I had an experience where I was talking to someone who was just talking about, all these spiritual pursuits that he was on, and it was quite lovely. He was very animated and very devoted in his spiritual practice, but I could kind of see myself in him. And it's a moment that I'll never forget. He was talking about all the stuff that he was doing. And I thought to myself, he wants God to love him. And he's just trying to be a good boy, he's trying to do it all right, say all the right chants and meditate so many hours a day and all these things. And I'm sure they were helpful to him. But what I saw was myself, which is, yes, that's why I'm doing this. I want God to love me because I don't feel loved by people. And and at that moment, I realized that something in me really needed to be healed, and that there was no bypass available. And at that point, I ended up going into therapy, and I began to remember what happened to me. And all the puzzle pieces began to fit together. And over a course of time, it took a while, because there was some major trauma in my childhood that really took some, work to move through. But I really did find healing, and I really found a very different connection on a very deep level to my deepest self and to a source of inner intuition and guidance, and a sense of really belonging to myself and connecting to myself in a very deep way. And it motivated me to become a psychotherapist because, as much as I love spiritual pursuits, and I think meditation and all of those things are invaluable, and they continue to be
Yes.
invaluable in my life, um, without some kind of sound psychological healing and grounding, it's really hard to pursue other things, no matter what they are, in a healthy way.
Absolutely.
And so for me, those two worlds are now very much united. I don't really see a big distinction between spirituality and mental health, really, because I think they go together and I think they
They
need each other.
absolutely go together. I tell my students this all the time. To me, that is a holistic practice. They come
Right,
together. You know, it's
right.
interesting. Can we go back? You said that you had decided to go because you had this realization. This realization is that you had some type of trauma, and within this realization, you knew that you had to go seek psychotherapy, or did somebody say, "Hey, you need to see a therapist"? How did you come up with the idea to go see a psychologist?
I think at the time I was in my mid-30s and I had three little children, and it was a really difficult time of my life because I was in a pretty dysfunctional marriage.
Hmm.
So it was a really hard time of my life, and I think I finally realized that I needed help from another person.
Okay.
And some of my friends at that time, that was in the I'm trying to think. It was probably in the mid to late 80s. Some of my friends had started going to therapy, and these were friends that I knew from spiritual pursuits. And I think it was just sort of coming of age, that we were the,
Sure.
the whole Pandora's box of our early conditioning and child abuse and
Right.
family dynamics. It was all kind of beginning to come to light. And I think something in me just knew that's where I needed to go next. I don't know if I can't pinpoint a
Yeah.
moment. I think I just knew.
Just kind of an intuitive feeling, like it's time
Yeah,
for me to come to go do this.
yeah.
It's really
And I
interesting.
was starting to have memories. So there was something
Okay.
really bubbling up inside of me that needed some place to process that I couldn't do by myself.
And so when you finally decided to see a psychotherapist, psychologist, or an MFT, what was the specialist? Do you remember?
I think it was a master's level person like myself.
Okay, incredible. So then you go to see a professional to talk to about what was stored inside you, what was about to be released. Did you have any idea what was going to come out?
Not a clue. I mean, I definitely knew it was something big because I could feel it in my body and I could feel it emotionally. And I was having a lot of ex, I don't know what you'd call them, sort of symptoms that were not specific to, well, they were specific in hindsight, but I was having like a lot of anxiety, a lot of panic, a lot of fear, a lot of really bad dreams.
Hmm.
Um, so my body was really telling me there's something, and it felt like something just has to come out. It really
Yeah,
felt that way.
yeah, definitely. Thanks for sharing. And I love how you're integrating the both because I actually have the opposite experience where I was just all hard science and I went to school straight. I went from high school straight to my bachelor's,
Mm,
straight to my master's, to my
mhm.
doctorate, but I was missing the spiritual element. So
Right.
you were reverse and you were spiritual, but then you were missing the human mental in my body
Definitely.
element.
Right.
So okay, great. So then thank you. So then you come back and you're seeing this specialist now, and you're starting to release and unleash the things that are stuck within your body, and
Right.
things that need to be released. You need to talk about it. So you
Right.
start releasing this information, you start talking about it, and what starts happening within you?
Yeah. I mean, I think that at first it was scary, but it was also, I would say it was two things at once. It was a little frightening. And it was also a tremendous relief because I think there was something inside of me that was desperate to know the truth. And I felt like I was reaching the truth. And I couldn't, I mean, you couldn't have stopped me from going to therapy, even if the sessions themselves were sometimes uncomfortable because of what got released. But there was so much relief and like, oh, I'm not a flawed person. I'm not intrinsically unlovable. There's nothing really wrong with me, but something happened to me that
Sure.
shaped the way I feel about myself and myself in the world in
Mhm.
a way that was really very painful for me and harmful. And I began to feel like I could move out of that and move through it. And I did, I mean, I think I'm on a healing journey for my whole life because I think
Sure,
that's the way it
sure.
works.
Yeah.
But I'm not in that dark place anymore. And so then when I began to work with people, and I worked with, there's a lot of abuse and neglect in our society. It's pretty rampant. And so,
Yes.
it wasn't surprising to me that many of the clients that came to me for, maybe more surface level looking issues ended up uncovering the source of their pain really being some kind of family dysfunction on some level of a
Mhm.
continuum of harm. And so I was able to really feel like I know there's light at the end of the tunnel, and I could hold that. And I felt like that was part of my job to like just know that there's light at the end of the tunnel for any of us.
Yes.
And we need each other to make that journey often. I mean, I think some of these journeys people I couldn't have made by myself.
Yeah, it's really incredible. And so in talking to your clients, so then you decided to become a psychotherapist yourself, which is incredible. You saw the benefit that it did for yourself, for your mind, body, soul, spirit, and
Right.
then you said to yourself, I need to do this for others.
Absolutely. I mean, and it really was, at first I had wanted to become an early childhood teacher, educator. But once I went to therapy, I knew that I had a different calling.
That's really incredible. Okay. So then you went towards your calling and now you're doing what you love, and you love it because you found it to be healing for yourself, and you know that this is a missing element for a lot of people. What
Right.
do you start to discover upon that's common with clients is apart from being family dysfunctions and trauma? What else did you start to discover?
Yeah, many things. I mean, many things. I don't know if I can recount them all here, but some of the big things that I discovered, even though each person's story is unique, each person is a unique individual with, their own nature as well as their own nurture. There were definitely common threads that I began to see over the
Yeah.
years. And one of them is that when people are hurt by other human beings,
Mhm.
they will have some kind of symptom somewhere. It may be
Oh yeah.
deeply buried. They may look really okay in the outside world. Often people become very pleasing or driven, hardworking, self-sacrificing, sometimes very creative. But that doesn't necessarily heal the pain that's underneath. And so what I discovered is we all become symptomatic in some way. And some of the symptoms are highly dysfunctional: isolation, self-harm, addiction, people pleasing to the point where you're really sacrificing your own well-being. Um, all the ways that people become either obsessive or rigid or too boundaried, or they have no boundaries, or they're highly aggressive, or they're extremely passive and can't stand up for themselves or find their voice. So we have this conglomeration of symptoms. And if we don't get any help or support or have someone who actually sees the real person, the essential self that's buried underneath our symptoms, we tend to start to believe that's who we are. And that's what was my story. That's what I believed. I believed I was a flawed, unlovable human being. And I was trying my best to compensate for that and hide it,
Yeah.
um,
Right.
until I began to realize that that's just not the truth at all. These are symptoms of being hurt by other people. And there's something very freeing about that. Um, and I think that one of the things that I learned as a therapist then is that no matter what anybody presented with, and people present with, a whole conglomeration of symptoms and struggles and blockages and whatever they're
Mhm.
dealing with that causes enough pain that they're willing to go to therapy. Um, I would just hold some place for them and in myself that there's an essential, totally pure, innocent, loving being buried under this rubble. And I'm going
Absolutely.
to work together with you to try to lift some of those layers off. And so it became a collaborative process.
It is definitely a collaborative process. And I love what you said that we are not our symptoms. This is
We are
all a
not.
result of us being hurt.
Right.
All of our symptoms.
Absolutely. And if I may say, there were two big threads, and I talk about this, I talk about all of this in my book, but especially these two big threads, because I think they're of not only individual and family concern, but I think they're actually of community, national, and global concern. And that is, and all of the symptoms are obviously, if people are in pain and suffering, they're not able to be their fullest selves, and in community
Exactly. Yeah. How can you
relationship.
be if
You can't be.
if you're being quieted, if you can't be yourself? I mean,
Right,
how can anybody be themselves? And how can you shine in your community, in your world?
right. You can't. And so I see our mental health crisis as a global mental health crisis. It's not those mentally ill people over there. It's a collective endeavor to really heal our collective mental health. But the two big things that I saw out of all those symptoms were that people tend, by and large, and of course, there's no one size fits all psychologically for human beings because
Right.
so different. But the two big tendencies were to either become somewhat passive or very passive and
Mhm.
submissive, because for many people, when they're so overpowered, especially in their body, but it doesn't even have to be physical or sexual abuse. It can be just emotional and domination and
Right.
silencing and humiliation or shame. When people are overpowered, many people become very submissive and passive because they really never got to develop their inner strength to stand up for themselves or say no or assert their opinion or trust their own intuition. And many people become the opposite, which is what we call in the world of psychology, which I know you know, identification with the aggressor. And they would become like the people that hurt them in some way, because the fear of being dominated was so great that they had to be the one up person rather than the one down person. And if you have a society of people that are being, and we do, many people are being hurt in their homes by policies and laws and practices, by discrimination, by
Mhm.
poverty, by persecution for their religious beliefs or their gender or whatever you have that we have going on, not only in America, but in the world, then you're without help, without escape from that kind of treatment, without even
Yeah.
being able to identify or call it out, you have more and more people who become easily controlled or controlling. And I think we're seeing some of that on a general societal level here in America and around the world. And that's a very dangerous place for the human race to be.
It really is. And so there are just so many people either being mass controlled or individually controlled, or and this is they're either becoming more aggressive or as aggressive as the aggressor, or they're becoming passive in order to defend themselves and back down. And
Mhm.
I mean, also their stress levels are just through the roof. And at this point,
Absolutely.
I mean, how can they even regulate themselves? They can't regulate their own cortisol at that moment.
Right.
And
And you know
so,
what? I was just going to say, I couldn't. Mine didn't come out as aggression. Mine came out as like high levels of panic and anxiety. And I felt completely out of control with those emotions. And I just was sometimes just felt like I was hanging on by my fingernails to get through the day. And I think, and it just has created so much empathy in me. And I'm sure you experience this as well, for the suffering that people go through no fault of their own, um, that they really don't know how to manage or even understand.
oh yes, absolutely. And so, as you're talking right now, I'm feeling into the collective trauma, emotional, physical, mental. I mean, all of the trauma going on that's either people are not exercising their true selves, they're not able to shine their own light. And in doing this, you have you have come to see that collectively it's a national priority for us to begin to heal. How
Yes,
can we heal on a global level? Because as you're saying this, I'm like being bombarded by all these thoughts, and I'm thinking of the diversity and different cultures, and how some cultures women are not allowed to speak, or I mean, you know what I mean? It's like some
I
cultures
do.
are more male dominated. It's like, well, how does one even begin to shed all of these layers? How do we begin?
Well, I think several, there's obviously not one place, but I think that there are several places, and I don't know them all myself because I'm looking through a psychological lens, and that's what I have to share. I think that, some people look through an economic lens or a climate lens or a
Sure,
medical
sure.
lens or whatever. But from
Right.
my lens, I think there's two things that really
Okay.
stand out for me. And one is we start with ourselves because
Right.
uh,
Yes.
one of the things that I believe very strongly from my experience personally as a client and many, many years as a therapist is that psychology is kind of like not being understood. Our psychology is not being understood as the big missing piece in national conversation and even in a global agenda. And the reason why, I think there's many reasons why, but what I would say is this, that we're being conditioned to believe that these big divides that we're experiencing in America today and all the violent rhetoric and the threats of violence and the mass shootings and all of the terrible things that are happening to so many people are the result of an vast and irreconcilable ideological differences, and somebody has to win and somebody has to just lose. And that's,
Right.
almost like it's a battle between good and evil.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that that's the bottom line truth. I believe that's what we're being told and conditioned to believe. But I believe that it's what we're really facing is a mental health crisis. And the reason why I say that is psychology is not partisan. Psychotherapy is not invested in you winning the argument or me
Exactly.
winning the argument. It's invested in healing our relationships with one another to the
Yes.
best of our ability, right? And if we can't heal them and we can never see eye to eye, we can learn to separate in peace, right? And
Absolutely.
so the whole thrust of psychology is in healing relationships. And obviously, and again, I know you know all this because of the work that you do, but I don't know that the general public knows all of this.
Right.
But when relationships really can't be healed easily, it's generally because the individuals in the relationships have unhealed wounds that are surfacing in the relationship and they keep being played out in the relationship. So there's a place for our own individual therapy or some kind of healing modality to heal the things that have happened to us that have harmed us the most, because when we're not treated well, we're going to become symptomatic, like we talked about before. And most often, those symptoms will play out in our relationships with other people as well as with ourselves. And my experience over so many years has shown me that when you can get to the wound, maybe it was physical violence in childhood, or maybe it was being left out or living with an addicted parent and not getting your, fundamental needs met. Whatever the wound was, and it could be bullying on the playground. It doesn't
Sure.
necessarily have to be in the home. It could be discrimination. For little kids who go to school and then all of a sudden they're taunted for the color of their skin or their religion or whatever. That when we have a chance to heal those wounds, we don't perpetuate them. We don't.
Right.
Never seen that happen with people. You know,
Exactly.
when we get to the source of the wound, we become more relational. Perfect? No, but better,
Yeah. And also, the more we can talk about our wounds with in a confidential setting with somebody, the more easier it becomes to talk about it with other people.
That's
And when
right.
somebody opens up, somebody else opens up to you, and it starts to connect people.
100%. And I've seen that so many times dramatically in different settings in my life where, there's sort of a tension in the room and then one person just gets real. And
Right.
everybody like breathes a big sigh of relief and they get to be real too.
Yeah.
They don't have to have a facade and they can just be human with each other. And then we feel connected. Then we feel connected.
Exactly, because everybody has some type of inner tension going on. And if
Right.
somebody can release one tension, we'll start to find the commonality that we all share together.
Right. And I think we live in a society that really has a lot of pressure on people to look good and to look like they have it all together and they don't
Right.
need a lot. And, I'm a self-made person, when in fact we really do need each other. And there's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. And it's
Exactly.
also the best food for us is to feel love and belonging with other human beings and safety with other human beings.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well said, Phyllis. I love it. Phyllis, I just had this thought. So, what about certain generations that feel that psychotherapy is, there's nothing wrong with me. I don't need to go to therapy. What about, I mean, how do we work through that? The people that think that way and that just put a wall up to
Yeah,
talk when clearly there's even a wound in the way that's making them even think that.
absolutely.
So how do we get past that wound or that trauma or that stigma and help open up just a little crack of window so that they can know that talking helps?
Well, I think one of the things that I think has been really lovely that's happened, we have so much social media and so many movies and so many documentaries and interviews with
Yeah.
people. And I love it when people who are, like celebrities or people who are really
Right.
well known will say, I have bipolar disorder, or I went to therapy, or I've suffered from depression,
Yeah,
because it really begins to open up the conversation and take the
it
stigma
does.
off of it. Not putting the responsibility on those people, but I see that as a sign of something beginning to open up. And one of the things I say this in my book, I say it to people all the time. And I know this from my own personal experience, and I certainly know this from working with hundreds of people, and that is that it's anything but a sign of weakness to ask for help for our emotional and mental well-being.
Exactly.
It takes strength,
It
it takes
does.
courage, it takes perseverance. It takes a lot of, just a lot of core determination, and to not let yourself be taken out by whatever you uncover. And let me just say here, because I want to draw a few little parallels to our country as we speak, and that is that,
Yes.
it can be very difficult and painful to talk about what happened to you. It
Sure.
took me a long time to say that I had been abused as a child. It just
Oh
felt
yeah.
so shameful, even though it's
Mhm.
not. I
Sure.
didn't do anything to deserve that, but it was still really hard to talk about. But I think the other, and so, as Americans, we can talk about these people did this and those people did that to us, and blah 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 blah, and there's importance in talking about that. But most of us have also hurt other people. None of us have been stellar in our own lives. Out
Mm.
of our own hurt, we've inadvertently or intentionally, but often inadvertently,
Yeah.
hurt even the people that we love. And it takes great courage and great strength to take responsibility for that and say, I was wrong. The way I spoke to you was wrong, or what I said to you was unkind, or I'm so sorry I did that, and it blah blah blah. And I think that's part of healing, is actually to be really accountable.
I
And I think
agree.
that's one of the big things that we really need when I talk about America and therapy is, yeah, we can talk about that. So many people came here fleeing persecution and poverty and war and, religious persecution and gender persecution and whatever was going on in the countries that they fled, and they brought their traumas with them, and no fault of
Mhm.
their own, but we've passed them on. We killed how many hundreds of thousands of Native Americans? We enslaved Black people. We did these things.
Right.
And can we be brave enough and strong enough and have enough courage to take responsibility, not just for what happened to us, but for what we've done? I think that's a real part of healing.
It really is. It's really incredible. Accountability is so huge because also once you're accountable, you're taking that responsibility and also releasing your own turmoil when you become accountable.
That's right.
So I mean, it's a healing, two-way healing street. I mean, it's really beautiful when somebody can actually be responsible for themselves and their actions and speak because you're speaking up for yourself at the same
Right.
time when you're doing that.
I love that you said that, because um, because I think one of the hardest things for many people to do is actually to apologize. We want people to apologize to us, right? We want everybody else to be accountable. But when somebody points the finger back and says, you did this that hurt me, or you did blah, blah, or you said blah, blah, many people become highly defensive because they've got their why and their justification or their
Sure.
shame or whatever they have to try to protect themselves. And actually, when you can say, I'm really sorry, it feels amazing. So I love that you brought that up because it really does release you as well as it's a gift to the person that you've made amends to.
It ends up being a gift for the both, for the connection itself.
Right.
And then that's how we grow, and that's how we keep connecting, by
Right.
being able to face some of the things that we've said and done, even if we're not aware of it.
Right. And what if we had leaders in positions of power, whether it's in industry or education or government or communities or whatever, who role modeled that, you know, to actually like have the courage to be accountable and
That's
not,
true, Phyllis. I don't think I've
right?
ever seen that.
You don't.
Wow. That's incredible. I've never even thought of this. I have not seen that. Can somebody in a position of power be accountable and say the words "I'm sorry" or "I was wrong"
Right.
or
Right.
"I made people or someone feel this way,"
Right.
and I see it and I feel it and I've got to have compassion now.
Right. And I've made amends, or I've actually learned to do something differently. I've learned from what happened. I mean, that's what takes strength and courage. Defending is an automatic unconscious response. We all do it really well, right?
Yeah.
We all know how to defend. But to actually like open up and be vulnerable and be accountable actually takes way more strength and way more courage. And obviously, from what you're sharing and from what I know from my own experience, it's so much more gratifying.
It is. And you know what, Phyllis? That is truly leadership when
That's
you
right.
can step up to the plate, quite literally.
That's right. I agree with that 100%. And I'm so wanting that kind of leadership, and that's part of the reason why I wrote the book, because I don't think the average person really uh, has psychological training. We don't understand what our reaction patterns are, even
Mhm,
as a society,
mhm.
and again, I'm sure you're aware of all of these things, but having worked with families so much and working with family dynamics, because even if you're working with an individual, you're still working with the family dynamics that they came from. Um, you know, Often when people are highly symptomatic, what they're symptomatic for is the distress in the family. A
Yes.
child who's bedwetting or being aggressive with other children or having night terrors or failing in school, almost always, and this was what I learned in my practice from seeing many, many children, was that they were really the symptom bearer for usually for high levels of conflict in the home that weren't being resolved, or conflictual divorce and an unsettled divorce. And they were the one calling for the help for the family. They were like, they didn't know they were doing that.
Mhm.
But their anxiety and their stress around what was going on in the family, they couldn't necessarily put into words, but it came out in their behavior.
Yes,
And I
absolutely.
think we have to know that as a country and as a world population, that our most symptomatic people are calling for help for the larger family systems that are dysfunctional, abusive, neglectful, or in some other way hurtful.
Wow, that's really incredible, Phyllis. You know, as you're saying this, I had this image in my head, or this feeling, this energy of when there's a family dysfunction such as the one you just described right now, and there's symptoms all around, nobody is responding, everybody's reacting.
Hmm.
And when everybody's in reactive mode, there really is no time to really sit down and even pay attention to the symptoms, because the symptom just keeps causing a reaction and the reaction still keeps causing a symptom, and it's a
Right.
cycle that keeps going and going and going until it blows up and gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
And that's what I think is happening societally. So we have people who are murderers. We have people who are, drug dealers or sex traffickers, or they're exploiting the poor, or they're doing something harmful to other people. And they're the tip of a big iceberg. And of course,
Mhm.
we don't like what they're doing. Nobody does. but we can either look at those people and say they're horrible and they're evil or they're sinners, or we should just lock them up and throw away the key, or we can ask ourselves, how did they get that way? What happened to them? What happened to the innocent little baby that they were born as, that they
Right.
ended up a murderer? Because something happened. And it's
Exactly.
probably many things that happened that disconnected them from their own humanity, that enraged them or depressed them or
Mm.
made them, paranoid or whatever it did that caused them to become highly symptomatic. And I think we have to look at the most symptomatic people and the most symptomatic kind of movements, even in our country and around the world, as alerting us to the ill health of our larger family systems that are producing these symptoms.
Yes, absolutely. And as you were saying this, I was just remembering just of some of my students work like in the jail system and just thinking
Right.
about how the prisons and the jails are getting overcrowded and overpopulated, and there's more and more, and they're storing them like sardines, and it's like, hang on a minute, but because of America being in this crisis, this mental health crisis,
Absolutely.
and it's
Absolutely.
not they're not really getting down into the deepest part of the individual themselves, and they're just creating like a whole city of people that with mental illness, rather than really addressing what's causing this and what's causing this domino effect and what's causing it to continue and build up and build up.
And absolutely. And in addition to that, and being committed to trying to heal people and not just
Mhm.
see them as, like I said, lock them up and throw away the key, but
Yeah,
are they capable of healing? Many, many people are,
absolutely.
right? So that's a big thing for me is just the injustice of that. And again, it's the blame shame cycle that we're in, rather than looking at cause and effect, deeply into cause and effect. And one of the things that I really like to share about that is that as a human race right now, I don't know how we were in past cultures, but maybe some version of this, but as a human race right now, we want the best. We want the highest
Yeah.
tech phones, the best computers,
Right.
the fastest cars. We want the most beautiful homes. We want to fly to the moon. We want to be able to replace organs and heal diseases. We want high tech everything except human relations. And that's why I feel that psychology is the big missing piece, because um, people are actually our most valuable resource.
Yes, we are our most valuable resource.
And in line with that, what I like to say is that, we want high-tech weapons also. And we put billions and billions of man hours and dollars into creating bigger nuclear bombs and drones and all the ways that we can kill more people at once, which makes no psychological sense. And if you and I were doing that in our basement, we'd be locked up.
Oh
But
yeah,
when we do it as a country, it's okay. So that disconnect is a mental health issue. It's not
that
an
is.
ideological issue, right?
Wow, I've never even thought of it like this, Phyllis. That's incredible. Oh, wow. That already creates a mental health illness right there.
Absolutely, because we're
Wow.
really being taught that we need to kill more people to be safe. And what we know from the whole world of psychology, and this is why I feel like it's sort of like the secret lying, the answer lying in plain sight. It's right in front of us. What I have learned is that there's only one thing that can make us safe, and that's safe people. It's not guns. It's not defenses. It's not hatred. It's not isolating certain people. It's not depriving certain people. And it's certainly not killing them. It's how do we become safe for one another? Because if I know that you're safe for me, I'm going to be way less defensive with you, whether it's verbally or physically.
Hmm.
In fact, I won't be defensive at all. I'll be so happy to be around you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's healing.
100%.
Safety is healing.
Safety is number one, right?
Definitely.
And I think that's why psychotherapy can be so helpful to people, because in the best psychotherapy, you're really in a safe place to explore your deepest pain and your greatest strengths and gifts. And not to forget that buried under your pain and your trauma and your compensating mechanisms that you use just to survive the best you could are all your gifts and strengths just waiting to have a place to be expressed in the world.
I love how you said this. It's all our gifts and strengths waiting to be expressed in the world. That's beautiful. That's our birthright.
That's our birthright.
Definitely our birthright. Hey, so Phyllis, what about families or people that can't afford or don't have the means to see a psychotherapist or a counselor of any sort?
Yeah, and I think that's, I think that's a tragedy that it's not, it's part of the withholding in our whole medical system, of like having, people who decide what you can, what you get to experience if you're on any kind of insurance. But of course, there's many, many, many people, and of course, people around the world who have no insurance and they have no
Mhm.
access to
Exactly.
psychotherapy.
Right.
So in America, what I would say is I think that it's part of, I think we just have to make a major shift. So I'm talking about individual things that may seem like, well, some of them probably seem like Pollyanna to some people, but they're all doable because we know they're doable because we do them as individuals, right? People can heal, people can change their lives, they can remake their lives, they can be better
Yes.
spouses, wonderful parents, they can become better colleagues and employees and teachers. We see this all the time that when people heal, they become more loving, more accepting, more cooperative human beings. Um, but many people don't have access to that kind of help.
Exactly.
I think the first thing is for people to even know what's going on. So when you talk about your illness,
Hmm.
what was it like for all those years when nobody could figure out what was wrong with you? It had to have
Yes.
been painful and frustrating and maybe sometimes despairing. I mean, I don't know, and
Yeah.
then light bulb, somebody found the diagnosis and they had
Right.
to help you. And so I think the more people like myself and like you, and like, I mean, there's thousands of us, I'm not alone in this,
Yeah.
will speak out about the diagnosis is our mental and emotional well-being and our mental and emotional ill health. That's where we have to look if we actually want to create some kind of change and cure and help and healing for ourselves as a human race. We just each need to have a voice to point that out. And hopefully, there's enough movement that people are saying, we want this. This is what we're voting for. We want our
Yeah.
tax dollars to go to help, and not just a pill, but a process.
Exactly. Yes, I love that. Not just a pill, but a process. And also, the more psychotherapists are exposed, and the more they get access to us, then the more there's going to be people wanting that as a profession for themselves,
Right,
such as yourself and such as
right,
myself,
right.
and then this just becomes like an open door for everybody globally. And is that how you see it? Is that what you see for the world?
Well, I see a couple of things. I see that for sure. I see that we're in desperate need of people who have some kind of training in a healing modality that can make it safe for people to work through their deepest wounding, just like we need doctors to do that for diseases and
Yes.
right? And we need the mechanics and the computer people. We need all of these people who can help fix things, right?
Right.
Um, but I, but, or and, not but and I think because a doctor will also look, they don't just look at, if you're having a symptom in your bladder, they don't just look at your bladder. They look at your whole functioning, right?
Right.
They look at your blood and they look at your lymph system and they look at your other organs and how they're functioning and your oxygen levels. I don't even know all of what they look at.
Yeah.
Look at the whole thing. And I think what's happening in the world of psychology, as well as economics and climate and medicine and politics and all of the different arenas in which people are having to function in the world today, that we need the people who see the big picture. And so we really need to look at, like a doctor has to look at the whole body, and then maybe they look beyond the body and they look at, what are you eating and what are you
Yeah.
breathing and what's in the building that you live in? Is there asbestos in the walls? Or are you suffering from extreme stress from an abusive boss, or too much pressure at work, or a divorce, or whatever? Like they're looking at bigger and bigger circles of the environment that are impacting the bodily health. And I
Absolutely.
think we have to do that with our mental health. We have to look not just at what's going on in the family and intrapsychically, but what's going on in the country, what's going on in the world. People today, have instant access to the news and all the
Oh
horror
my
that's
goodness.
going
Yeah.
on. And we're suffering from that. It begins to create a feeling of hopelessness and helplessness in people that actually impacts not only their physical health, but their mental and emotional well-being.
It's interesting you bring up the news right now because I was at the gym before this and there was some TVs in front of me and it was like the worst news of all time. This and this person murdered this. I was like, what? Because I don't watch the news. I'll read and see whatever pops up on the internet, but for the most part, I don't watch the news. And so, well, it was in front of me while I'm working. I'm like, this isn't working. I'm trying to do something for myself physically here for my well-being, and that's not
Right.
good for my mental well-being. So I need to divert my attention and look at something else. And it's interesting because that could be happening at home. Someone could be working out at home and have the news
Absolutely.
on. It's like, wait a minute, how is this going to help?
And there are people who watch the news 24 hours a day, all day. Um, and yes, and so I
There
think,
are.
and these all point to so many of the big issues that I love to talk about in terms of like the larger family systems dynamics. And that is that, just being exposed on a constant basis to images of war and,
Oh
horrible
no.
things that
Yeah.
politicians are saying about each other, and, and hate crimes and all of that. Not that we shouldn't know that those things are happening, but we need to have a balance between, it's okay to know, just like you need to know if your wrist hurts, you probably have somebody look at it and see if there's a broken bone
Sure,
or a
sure.
sprain or whatever. So we need to know what's causing the pain, or what the pain is. But we need to have a focus on what's curative. And what would our whole country be like if the news had was really flooded with all the good things people are doing for one, right? And some programs are, but that's not what you generally get when you open up the news or social media. You get the dramatic things, the eye-catching things, the
Yeah.
macabre things. And so, for the in the speaking in the big picture in that way, I think one of the turning points that we're at as a human race is, just because we can do something doesn't mean we should. Just because
Exactly.
we can build nuclear bombs doesn't mean we should, and certainly not drop them. But you know what I mean? Like, we have abilities that I think we have to say, this isn't good for us. We're not going to do it. Just like if you were a parent in a family and your kids just wanted sugar all the time, you have to say, if you want your kids to be healthy, I know you like sugar, I know it tastes really good, I like it too, but a diet of sugar is going to make you ill, and
Mhm.
it's going to affect your mental and emotional well-being as well as your body. So we're just not going to eat all that. And as a society, and again, I don't mean like with censorship or anything like that, I think we have to embrace what's actually good and life-giving for us and focus on that, and say no to the things that aren't.
Yeah, for a good, healthy, well-balanced mental health diet.
Right.
This is
And what
awesome.
are those things? I call them, I say we want high-tech everything except human relations. So what are high-tech human relations? Well, again, they're everything we already know. Nothing I say here is going to be something that's a surprise to you. High-tech
Sure.
human relations are love and empathy and caring and belonging and cooperation with one another and sharing and valuing each other, and tolerance, not only tolerance, but celebration of our diversity. And a big one is a commitment to nonviolent communication and conflict resolution. We're not going to pick up arms when we're angry at each other, whether
Yeah.
they're verbal arms or emotional arms or actual weapons. We're not going to do it.
Just wonder what would, as you were speaking, I was thinking in my mind and imagining what would the world look like if we were more loving and opened our hearts and more connective and chose human connections over technology. And then how would technology evolve after that? If we all
Yeah.
became more connected on a human level. And I just have and just being able to embrace everybody's diversity. I just thought of Disneyland's Ride a Small World. It's a small world after all. Everybody would be holding hands
Mm-hmm.
and welcoming each other and stop the shame and the blame. There's no reason to keep that shame blame cycle going because that's really what's causing all this mass destruction.
And everything that you just said, I believe most people really want in their lives. I don't know
Yeah,
anybody who wants their house to be bombed. I don't know anybody who
right.
be discriminated against. I don't know anybody who doesn't want to have a living wage. These are the things we all want. And it's really a disconnect on a mental health level that we allow those things to happen to other people and even condone them when we wouldn't want any of it to be done to ourselves. And to me, coming back to mental health is really, I mean, I remember writing about this as an essay question when I was in elementary school. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And
Yeah,
that actually is the answer.
that is the answer. It is. This has been incredible, Phyllis. Thank you so much for sharing your light and all of your wisdom and all of your incredible experience. What is your biggest takeaway personally from your book, and what do you want people to get the most biggest takeaway from your book?
Yeah, well, the biggest takeaway is, I mean, I just really want to share some of my understanding that I've shared with you, with the general public, because I really think the first line is education. I went out and read all kinds of books on psychology after my first session with a therapist, and like information is really helpful. Obviously, you have to apply it, but you need to know what to apply. So I think education is really, really helpful. But I guess what I want to say is a couple of things. One is we can all make a difference. Every single person can make a difference. If you want this world to be a more loving, peaceful, kind place, just look for every opportunity to be that yourself.
I love
Because,
it.
right,
Yeah.
right.
If you become it, it becomes contagious.
Right. And it does. You see that all the time. If somebody walks into the room and they're like, "Hey, it's so great to see you.
Yeah.
You look fabulous today." Like you light up, right?
Yeah, right.
Right? Makes your day. Or I just read your book. It's amazing. Like, right?
Yeah,
So
definitely.
we can all do that and go out of our way to do that and be conscious of doing that because nobody knows the ripple effect of one kind moment that they
Oh, that's
share.
so
I
true.
mean, it can just change a whole person's day and their life and the way they interact with their family and give them hope. I mean, think of the people that made a difference in your life. They didn't know they made a difference in my life, but they
Yeah,
did, right?
absolutely. I love that, the ripple effect. It's so powerful.
It's so powerful. And the other thing I just want to say real quick is like, I think a lot of people feel like it's too late. That the human race is just, on a bad trajectory and we're probably going to wipe ourselves out or most of us out or it's just going to be this way and the oppressors are going to take over and, more and more people are going to be subjugated. And there's nothing they can do about it. And one of the things that I think that we really need right now is we need to dream big. We dreamed of
Yes,
leaving the Earth's atmosphere and flying to the moon. Somebody had a dream that organs could be replaced.
right.
Somebody had a dream about computer technology or cars
Yeah.
or increasing our food supply or whatever the dreams were that people had, building a cathedral, right? A
Sure.
beautiful work of art. Um, and there's no reason why we can't have a big dream for the sustainability and love for the human race. There's no reason why we can't have that dream too.
That is so beautiful, Phyllis, because all dreams become a reality, especially if
Right,
we all start dreaming together.
right,
And that was really the hope of Martin Luther King.
right. I know. I love that.
Well, this is really amazing, and it's been a blessing connecting with you. Where can our viewers or watchers and our listeners find you and your book?
Thank you. You can find my book on any of the major booksellers, Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and any place where you go online to buy a book, it's there. And you can find me at www.phyllisleavitt.com. That's my website, and I'm on all the social media, Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram and whatever. And I have articles on Substack. And I also want to just tell your viewers that if you sign in on my website to contact me or sign up for my newsletter, I try to write a regular newsletter. You will get a free PDF, which is it's called The 6 Secrets to Repairing Relationship After Conflict, and these are just very
Oh, that's incredible.
concrete things that we can all apply in our lives. And they have a lot to do with some of the things we talked about restraining our most reactive impulses and really taking responsibility for ourselves. But I wrote that PDF in a way that, you can really make it personal to your own life. So that's available for anybody for free. I have lots of interviews on YouTube. Those are the best. And you can also just write to me at phyllis@phyllisleavitt.com. I'd be happy to get an email or questions or just a sharing from anyone.
Wow, so you're an incredible resource yourself. That's beautiful.
Thank you. So are you.
Thank you. Phyllis, I have a poem that I wrote for this for you for this episode.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to read this now.
Okay,
All right,
great.
let's do it. Okay. I don't usually title them. I just write, I free write, I free associate, and just let the message come through. So
Beautiful.
it's not titled, but I guess I could title it Phyllis E. Leavitt.
All right.
In my deepest compassion, I am called to unite a crying group. I am called to unite a new connection. I am called to join together what we collectively yearn for. As the sun yearns for the moon, as the moon yearns for the stars to navigate movement, my call is right here. And right here, I hold hands with whoever you might be. For at the end of the day, we all stand under the same sky, on one planet, in a web waiting for true connection. And this is how we heal.
Oh my God, that is fabulous.
Thank you.
I mean, I really mean that. I
you.
love it. Would you allow me to share that if I attach your name to it?
Of course, absolutely. It's for you. But what I'll do, is
I
I'll
would
email
really
you.
like to do
I'll type
that.
it up and I'll send
You
it to you
will?
through email. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. I really
Well, thank you so much. It's your energy, Phyllis. It's your energy.
No, it's also yours.
It's our energy. It's our connection.
Energy. It's our energy.
Because we have this is a perfect example on what happens when you start healing your mental health. You and I are showing what can bloom from that. So thank you for doing that for yourself. And I will continue to do that for myself and to be able to demonstrate this to others so that they can start healing themselves and we can heal the world.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And I really appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure and a blessing. Thank you, Phyllis. Take care and we'll keep in touch.
Okay, great. Bye.
Goodbye. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in to A Little Less Fear podcast. If you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. Tell your friends and your family about A Little Less Fear podcast. And if you are interested in being on my show, feel free to leave me an email at alittlelessfear@gmail.com. Or if you have any questions or comments and you also want to leave me an additional message, you can also do so from my website, leaving an inquiry at www.alittlelessfear.com. You can get a copy of my book on Amazon, Amazon Kindle, and Amazon Kindle Unlimited, also titled A Little Less Fear. And thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate all the support. Leave me a review if you get a chance. I love to receive feedback, questions, and comments. And any way that I can be a support to you, please let me know. Thank you so much. I love you. Wishing you love, light, happiness, and many blessings your way.